Hello there. So I've got my friend David here. David and I go way back, like, I don't know, maybe 14 years. David started contacting me from, I can't remember the name of a network, but some network, and he was looking for collaborators in the intentional community movement. And it took a long time until we finally met. And I think, I don't even remember the last time I saw David, may have been at Burning Man. Anyway, this is David, and I thought I'd bring him on to talk about what he's up to these days. He's up to a lot. He's a real epic evolutionary economist, kind of breaking the edge of technology and economies and earth-based care as well. So I'm really excited about what he does, and I want to hear more about it. So how are you, David?
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me on today. I'm excited to catch up in this format.
So the last I heard, you were flying all over the world pumping Resource Network. I want to hear about Resource Network.
Okay, yeah. So let's see. Since we have hung out in person, I think you're right. It was before the pandemic, and probably at Burning Man or similarly close by. And so since there's been a pandemic, and my last enterprise, which is still active but has been on a temporary hiatus, NuMundo, which is very intimately connected to Inanita. And yeah, I met my co-founder Erica there, and so the NuMundo is a transformational travel platform, and it was very dependent on international border crossings, which became very difficult in the pandemic, and I'm sure you guys experienced that a lot at Inanita as well. Although Nicaragua was accepted in some ways from what most of the world went through, I think at the very beginning.
But the flights weren't coming, and the border to Costa Rica was closed. So effectively, even though our borders weren't closed, we were closed off. Yeah.
So that basically happened on a macro scale around the world to all these retreat centers and places that we worked with. And so I got the very clear message that it wasn't the time for NuMundo to be a travel platform. And we toyed with the idea of going virtual or online, like the discussion that you and I were just having a few minutes ago, and having kind of virtual experiences that people could tune in from their houses during that time, which a lot of people were on the internet. I think it was like the highest moment ever of human beings being online. And we decided not to go that way. It just didn't have the heart or energy to turn like a physical experience platform into like a virtual experience platform. And so what happened is, out of that, we had been doing these experiments for years using blockchain and crypto to enable barter between eco-villages and intentional communities and retreat centers and volunteers and travelers. And these experiments had basically yielded some really interesting results. We've been doing these basically barter experiments between communities in Costa Rica, and we got the technology working. We got a few retreat centers trading with each other, but this was very early in the blockchain days. This was like probably 7 years ago at this point. The technology wasn't where it is today. And when the pandemic happened, travel was no longer a thing, and so I had to find a new pursuit. And B, the technology. I was following crypto and blockchain technology pretty closely for the 2 years up until the pandemic, and suddenly a lot of things were possible that had not been beforehand. And for me, using blockchain and crypto to facilitate real world barter and trade and exchange was such an obvious use case for the technology, but no one was really doing it. People were just trying to create money that makes more money and do the same shit that normal capitalism does. Yeah.
Exactly. A revolution revolving to the same point. Exactly. I hear you. So I love, tell us more about how that works. I think some people don't understand the distinction, and it's probably worth highlighting it in as many places as we can, between cryptocurrencies and what's possible in the blockchain.
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to frame it is that blockchain is like the internet. It's this new communication technology that has infinite use cases that most of them we haven't thought up yet. Just like the internet in 1998, no one really knew what people were going to do with it. And then crypto is something like e-commerce or PayPal. It's this one like thing that you can do with blockchain. It's a really cool thing you can do with blockchain, which is create currencies, and that's very powerful. And it enables humans to create banking systems, whereas before we didn't really have a choice of which banking system we used, and now we do. And that's very powerful and transformative in its own right, because it means that we're democratizing money. And that means that we're creating more equality in a place that there wasn't before, which is very transformative in its own sense. But money and cryptocurrencies are only one version of what a blockchain can do, just like e-commerce and PayPal and Venmo are only one aspect of what the internet unlocked. So that's like one way to think about it. On a very basic sense, a blockchain is just a ledger or a list or a database of things that happened. It's like a record. So in the ancient, actually, let's go back to like the Wild West in the 1880s. So the general store had a ledger of accounts, and you could come in as a farmer and get some feed or some corn, and then your balance would go down to minus 300, right? You'd owe 300 at the general store. And then the next week you come in and you bring vegetables, and your balance goes up to 100. Now you have credit at the store. So basically a blockchain is that. It's that same thing, that little book in the general store, but copy pasted a million times all over the world so that everyone has a copy of it.
Right. I think that's one of the things that doesn't get highlighted enough about the blockchain is its potential for transparency. I think, like you were pointing to, what we're using this really, it's funny, you called the blockchain a very powerful tool. And one of the things I've often, explored with myself and with others and people I work with is this: power is great. Power in itself is innocent. We often sometimes demonize power, and we often sometimes like have a greed for power, but the power itself is never good or bad. It's how we use it, right? And the blockchain I see is another one of these potentials. It has this great potential for transparency, right? I mean, the ledger is perpetually public. It's like, wouldn't I love to know where my vegetables are coming from, right? Rather than and I can use that same thing, sure, to create a bunch of money, which I love the idea of breaking the banks, or democratizing banking is beautifully put. But the downside of that I see is some of the people that are coming into money, I don't think there seems to be a lack of, it feels so infinite that consumption seems infinitely possible, which seems like it's actually adding to the potential for destructive behavior rather than taking it away. Whereas this barter system seems to use the blockchain in a much more like holistic, kind of healthy way. What do you think? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, I think one of the key transformative aspects of a blockchain is transparency, and transparency in supply chains, transparency in, for example, how our tax dollars get spent, or how a donation,
that's exciting.
Yeah, or how a donation to the Red Cross gets spent as it kind of diffuses through the various layers of the international development industrial complex.
Welcome.
So yeah, having that kind of lens on capital and on supply chains and on, for example, pharmaceutical medicine that's often counterfeit. You can imagine many use cases that have nothing to do with crypto and everything to do with transparency and seeing how the systems that are, were beforehand invisible, how they work now. And that alone can create a lot of accountability and transparency that can lead to transformative societal impact. But yeah, what's been happening a lot in crypto for years since it got to be a thing that people made money from, which was starting around 2016, 2017, is that it brings in a lot of speculative Wall Street people that see opportunity, and they don't have the same value system as a lot of the early blockchain developers and entrepreneurs, and they're more in it because they see dollar signs, and that can be felt more and more throughout the space. So I think in some ways the blockchain space has lost its way a little bit, and not completely, but a lot. There's a lot of, like you said, immature, misguided energy, I guess, and it's okay because a lot of that enables builders and developers to do things. Like we are at Resource, I can say we benefited from all this hype and community, because there's so much general excitement about crypto and blockchain around the world right now. And some of it is for good reasons, some of it is for whatever reasons, and maybe I'm not one to judge, but we definitely.
Yeah, I get a little hesitant. I have my judgments, but I try not to thrash them out.
Yeah, and but every new technology cycle, every new transformative technology has a hype cycle and a bubble, but those bubbles can be productive in funding new endeavors in ways that before were not possible, because banks and the institutions don't like to fund this kind of stuff necessarily, because it is very disruptive to their existing structures and business models. So yeah, I think that's a little bit about my thoughts about the culture. And I feel like it's very immature. I feel like it's very young, and it has a lot of maturing to do. And I feel like that will come with time. And yeah, what we're looking at with resources is using blockchain to create ways where people can directly exchange resources, products, services with each other without using what we think of as money. And we do this in a way that is called mutual credit. And mutual credit is basically like a barter circle. It's not a one-for-one barter though. It's like the whole circle basically has credit with each other. In other words, like that general store example, anyone can go to the general store and deposit products or services, or consume products or services.
And then who owns this general store?
So nobody. The general store is the blockchain. It's basically a ledger, and you have a balance of either positive or negative. So either you have more you have credit, or you have a debit.
But there's always a zero balance in the collective.
Exactly. The system always adds up to zero, so there's no free money.
There's no free money, right? That's key.
Yeah,
that's the key. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not speculative. It's basically a tool for liquidity to enable people to exchange with each other.
Nonetheless, the blockchain needs something to support itself. I guess that's one of the reasons I was asking who owns the general store, because somebody's got to pay to keep the general store operating.
So yeah, blockchains are like public infrastructure, like a highway, like a public highway. It's just up there. There's small gas fees that are.
That's what I was wondering. That it's taking some energy from somewhere. So where does that cost get sucked up? Through the collective?
So yes, essentially. Well, what happens in our system is every time that two merchants or individuals do a transaction, that products or services are exchanged, there's a small transaction fee. And that transaction.
That's what I was wondering. That's what I was imagining. There'd have to be, just to be really transparent, to come back to transparency.
Yep. And that transaction fee gets distributed to all of the people that are kind of helping support the network in the form of staking, which is basically kind of putting up collateral to help run the network and decide which,
the motor churning.
Decide which businesses are creditworthy and are appropriate to be underwritten, which are basically, it's like decentralized banking, right?
Right. These are like the members of the bank, of the decentralized collective bank.
Like a credit union. Yeah.
Right. Translating it back to our culture, from the old culture back to the new culture through our lingo.
Yeah. It's like a credit union, like a cooperative credit union.
So I'm going to throw a wild one out there, David. I'm just thinking we've been this ecological economic thing is a place where we're both super jazzed. But the topic of transparency comes up, and I'm super turned on by that topic. And so outside of the public, I don't know where this is coming from, but outside of the public world, or maybe in the public world, how is it to be in this world? Yeah, this is a big question. How is it to be in this world of kind of, the hype phase, like you said, it's where all the energy is. There's a lot of movers and shakers. There's a lot of money moving around. There's a lot of things to protect. There's a lot of things to create. How is it to work with the theme of transparency as a human in that field of that's so rich in economic and environmental impacts?
That's great.
How is it to be a businessman in this context? As I know, a heart-centered person that you are, but it's a sharky world out there.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a few layers to that. And there's a lot coming up in my personal life lately as reflections and opportunities and invitations for growth that may have to do with me being faced with challenges that will either make me a better leader and lessons I need to learn, or they will cost everything. And I think in crypto, like in all fields, like attracts like, and you gravitate towards the people that you resonate with. And so there are some people from Wall Street that are just looking for profit, and those are not necessarily people that I'm going to resonate with on a energetic level, even if I don't have any idea where they're coming from or who they work for. And other people that come from our community, from the permaculture community, from the Burning Man community, that I don't need to know what they work for. I meet them and I resonate with them and I like them. And then an hour later, we might talk about what each of us do professionally and how we can work together. So that process has been pretty organic. And the global Web3 crypto conference circuit is in full swing right now all around the world. And it's a global traveler, digital nomad community. I'm sure that many of the folks pass through Inanita because they're, constantly moving, and more and more.
You're referring to like the people we also met at Anarcha, Portugal, when you invited me there to speak.
Yes.
This tribe.
Yeah, that's more of the alt burner community overlapping with crypto. And there are many niches, just like in any space, right? Just like in normal Web 2 internet technology, you'll find all sorts of people.
Cool. And so what about this trend? What lesson are you going to learn? Come on, I'm going to tease it out of you a little bit. Like you said, lessons in leadership, or what kind of decisions? Now, I'm not asking you to out your journey, but what I'm saying is like, what are you faced with as you get into more powerful position in terms of how to be, how to handle transparency?
Yeah. So first, I think it's important to say that our organization is currently undergoing a transition from being a company to being a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization with cooperative governance and not a hierarchical corporation with executives. So I'm
in transition to that.
Yes. So I'm currently in transition from being an executive at a company to being a steward on a governing council of a decentralized autonomous organization. And that's a new thing. That's a new paradigm. This DAOs are things that didn't exist a few years ago. Now they have their own legal structures. So we have a legal entity in Switzerland that is kind of a cooperative entity, something like
that's fascinating.
Something like a membership organization.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it's a process of being humble. And
I was going to say that must be a little bit of an ego journey.
Yeah, I think that I never really wanted to be like a power holder, in the sense that it wasn't something that I was seeking. I was more seeking being in service. And I think that's a good thing, because I've seen around me people that seek power and maybe aren't ready for that responsibility, or they get high on it and abuse it in some way, which you see with leaders of governments around the world. And so,
or in myself, even at times, I have a lust for power, like that can happen. Yeah.
I think it's a pretty normal human tendency. So yeah, it's been a process of humbling myself and stepping out of the way in many cases, and just understanding what I do well and focusing on that, and empowering other people to do what they do well.
I feel like challenging you a tiny bit, David. I wonder, like, I love I like you with like a more decentralized, more just world. And I think we both share that real strong desire. I think it's part of, a utopian dream that we both share. But I wonder sometimes when I see you, I wonder, because you're so fixed on it, I wonder sometimes if it's like, you're afraid to actually be as powerful as you are, until others maybe stand next to you in the light of it, so you can feel safe to be that powerful.
That's a good question. So I think that I have been forced to do that this year and last year, and have been forced to be in the position where I need to make decisions that are assertive and that create solid and clear power structures. And I didn't have a choice or any other way around it. And it's happened multiple times. So that's been a learning journey for me, and definitely empowering. I have a great community of advisors and mentors, yourself included, that have helped me through that process. And now it's not shying away from power, but it's adopting a new understanding of what power looks like in a decentralized way, which by the nature of a blockchain network, you need to decentralize it or else it doesn't function well. So that is also, there are like practical reasons for doing this, so that the flow of the entity, the flow of the organism can become more organic.
So it's a whole systems regenerative system.
It's a mycelial network.
Yeah.
It needs to operate off of collective intelligence. It
has to be an ecosystem unto itself.
Yeah, and I think that is why it's so disruptive, because corporations and banks from the legacy world, or however you want to put it, the default world. Yeah, that's a word that crypto people use, like legacy finance or traditional finance. So that world is still run in hierarchical top-down ways. And those types of organizational structures are really good at doing something like mass production, but they're not good at innovating and adapting to complex shifting realities. So
I love seeing that you're holding the polarity of sometimes, like, we're in a transitionary world. We can't jump. Some of us have to lead and be willing to make the decisions that people might judge us for and step into that authority so that the new thing can be born. I don't think there's another way.
I agree.
Yeah. So thank you for doing your part in that and grabbing a hold of your balls and just fucking sucking it up.
You're welcome.
Cool. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed catching up with you.
Likewise.
And I'm really excited. Every time I turn around, it'll be 6 months or years since we last spoke, and you'll be on to some epic new stage or epic new adventure. And I'm loving watching you take all the steps. And always, also, I just want to say, like, I've seen you go what seems like far and wide from like what I knew to be this kind of rainbow family guy on the side of the mountain in Guatemala kind of thing. And I've watched you take the ride into these big worlds of finance and economics, which is actually our both shared youth interest, I think, because, I have a degree in economics. And anyway, going out there and doing all that and standing on these stages in Japan with all these tens of thousands of people, but keeping it real and keeping it connected to regenerative and share, this people share, like being a permaculturalist, no matter how far and wide you go out into that big expanded world, you keep coming back to the earth. And I see it every time I check in. I'm like, have we lost him yet? And we haven't. And I'm really super grateful for that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I actually wanted to say one more thing that might be useful and interesting to anyone who is out there. And I was recently recruited by the blockchain ecosystem team that we've been partnering with called Celo. And Celo is a carbon negative blockchain that is designed in a way that sequesters carbon from the atmosphere. And all of their focus is on regenerative finance and financial inclusion. It's very special in that way amongst blockchain ecosystems and crypto networks. And even Charles Eisenstein has spoken about it, which should be telling, because he doesn't. Yeah,
I was getting ready to talk to you last night. I was getting inspired by picking up a bit of him myself.
Yeah, and yeah, he's great. And so the Celo network has recruited me to be a scout, to go out and find early stage, pre-seed and seed stage companies working on some financial inclusion and regenerative finance or carbon sequestration projects that have a crypto or Web3 element. So that is another hat that I am recently wearing.
You have been anointed with, let's shall we say. So wait a minute. So let's get the opportunity straight. somebody who's sequestering carbon, is that into like, would that be a community, like an inani to that, or would that be more like a, I don't know, tell me. When you
Yeah,
say,
so
an agroforest, what would it be? Like, how is that being identified?
So blockchain projects actually often start with communities and no product. So
Right.
It can be a community. Usually it's more like an online community, but it can be any sort of community. But yeah, in terms of the financial inclusion or regenerative finance, carbon, it's usually a way that we can use Web3 or crypto or tokens or blockchain to either track carbon or incentivize people to sequester carbon, plant trees. So it's usually
so like buying off your airline gas credits with a carbon positive thing.
Yeah, it's usually some kind of software or app.
Okay. All right. I just, that world's a little bit, I'm techie, but it's getting out there. And how to integrate the two, that's your niche. So thank you for that. Tell me, Celo is the name of it?
Yeah, Celo. And they work a lot in Africa with mobile payments, remittances, working in refugee camps. So those are also other types of startups.
Coming through now. Yeah, I've somebody else has mentioned this to me now. Okay, keep me on the cutting edge, David. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right, brother. My heart goes out to you. I can't wait till the next time we're together again, be it in a community, in nature, or in a city. I imagine a dance floor will be a part of it.
Yeah, that sounds great. I will see you there.
All right. I love you.
Thank you. I love you too.